Well, then the final question I ask, which is a walk-away, it's a very confusing question. 99% of the time, I run into confusion. Like, you lost me there, Sam. That's very common. I get that like it's me. You know, like, I'm lost. Like, I'm the one who's lost. And I'll say, well, which person are you then? After a period of abstinence, you know, have you ever gotten into a period where you don't use, where you're not using substances? And they'll say, yeah, I've definitely had periods of where I've been clean. Albeit it may be when they're in jail. You know, it might be a forced remission of some sort. You may have to stop using. You may be on supervision. Or you may have just decided on some level you want to make a change. So you stop using. You stop committing crimes. Oftentimes, they'll tell me, when I see them at some point, you know, I'll say, how are you doing? And the person will say, I'm doing great, Sam, I'm doing good. But that spidey sense that I have is still tingling. And I'm like, well, I used to, you know, I would assume that they meant what I meant when I said I was doing good. That's something that's really hard to separate from. Because we use these words and we think we're using them the same way. When I say I'm doing good, I'm like, I got a job, my wife is okay with me today, my dog still wags his tail when I walk in the home, my kids have forgiven me for whatever I didn't do for them when they were in first grade, all that stuff. I am doing good. The police aren't looking for me. In combination. But what they mean is, I've had a period, in some cases, I've had a period of non-arrestability. It's a good day when I didn't get arrested. And that's really the extent of what they mean. And I remember that, you know. If I was out 6 months, boy, that was the best I had ever done. That was I needed a cake, because I needed to celebrate that. That was my measure of goodness here. So then we ask, you know, have you ever been clean? Have you ever stopped? Because if you were, what is the premise? The premise is that you are all of these things right here, right? On this segment right here, this part right here. This is what you are. Once you're not using, once you're not acting out, those are the characteristics that you own. Correct? You follow me? You guys with me? Just kind of nod there. Okay. So which person are you then? While in the moment of a period of abstinence or not acting out, which person are you when you decide to go ahead and use again or to violate again? Which person are you? Call it out. Somebody just yell it out. Somebody. Which person would you assume that you were once you've entered not using?
Not me.
Not me. But remember what the premise is. In order to be the not me, you have to be using or acting out. We're talking about in the middle of being in a period of abstinence, in a period of not acting out. So which person are you? This is confusing, isn't it? I'm like, I understand. I get the same response. This is very typical. It's the same response. What is this guy talking about? Well, of course you're the not me. Well, wait a minute. Think about it. In order to be in the not me, you have to be using. If you are sober or clean or not acting out, then you have to assume that you are in this category. You're in the not using category. So that means you're the responsible one. You're the one who makes good decisions. This is the personality that you've identified, you know, that you're reliable, you're trustworthy, that you respect other people, your partner, your family. When you're in that side of the continuum, how then does it become possible to make the decision to become the other side of you, or the not you? If these things were true, if the things on the left were true, how is it that you can make a decision to act out or to use again? Is anybody not getting this right now? It's a subtle confrontation. Because most of the time we hear people blaming these things over here, the using, the lifestyle as the reason that they're doing these things, that it clouds their judgment. Well, what are we discovering right now? We're discovering that even when we're not using, we still are making decisions to become the user, to become the person who acts out. Which flies in the face of this theory that they've developed right here. This is their theory. This isn't my theory. This is how they've organized. This is how they've structured their view of self. I'm way better as a person who's not using. We would like to think that that's the truth. But how many of you know people who have been clean and who regress? And most of the time they don't own any of the other side. The me takes ownership of good behavior. If you notice that on the paradigm, all the good things were on that side. You know, the me, hey, I'm the greatest guy you'll ever want to meet. We'll hear that also. I'm the greatest guy you'll ever want to meet. I'm doing good because I'm not getting arrested. Which leads to a certain amount of pride because I'm not getting arrested. I feel good about myself. Shoot, I stayed out of the joint for 2 years. Feeling pretty good about that. And you should, depending on it. The not using part, when we start to actually understand what's in that, what's beneath, why are you not using? And this is what we have to start evaluating. Because you will pass an AODA program if you're not using. That's a sign of change for most AODA programs. You're not here. Hey, I'm going to sign off on your treatment plan, and here's your discharge summary. You haven't used in 1 whole year. And we're assuming that that is a sign. That behavior is a sign of the change process. But let's think about that. Not using basically means that the person has no intention. There's no true intention behind not using. A lot of times you'll hear that there's an avoidance of consequences. Well, why didn't you hit this guy in the hallway? Shoot, man, I got 2 weeks left before I get out my program. Which is, to us, a sign of change because we're like, you know, a year ago, you would have knocked that guy out whether you were 1 day away from that. But we're assuming that that's a sign of change. I almost think of it as an isolation. We're isolating ourselves from behavior as opposed to selecting different behaviors. So there's a big difference between the two. Stopping one behavior as opposed to choosing a different behavior are 2 different ideas. Sound very similar but very different. The using part of the continuum, relapse is often mistaken as being cued by the point when somebody uses. I'm supposing that using is the end result of a relapse. It's the physical manifestation of a relapse. It's the last stage of relapse. Violating is the last stage of relapse. It is not the sign that relapse has started. That's why most of the people who say it happened so fast, they don't identify anything that led up to that. Just like most treatments don't identify when the decision to use was made as opposed to the point when they used. Many moments have led.